Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. It is time for a What's New at Ancestry edition. This is for February 2020. First off, let me just tell you, I have missed you. It's been a few months and we have a lot to cover today. I'm going to try and get through it as quickly as possible. If you've never joined us for a What's New episode before, here's what you can expect. We are going to talk about the genealogical conferences and events for 2020 that Ancestry will be participating in. Then we're going to cover some of the new changes made to the site, to Ancestry, since we last spoke. And then we're going to cover just some highlights of some of the new content or genealogical records that Ancestry has placed online. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive in. The first genealogical conference coming up is RootsTech. RootsTech 2020 will be the 10th anniversary of this largest genealogical conference in the world. It's going to be held the 26th through the 29th of February in Salt Lake City. That's in just 2 weeks, so hopefully you have made plans to attend, and if you have, please come by the booth, introduce yourself. We'd love to meet you. We'll have lots of people from different areas of the company, genealogists, product managers, DNA scientists, and so if you have questions, we'd love to hear those as well. If you have not made plans to attend, you can still participate in RootsTech. So go to the rootstech.org website. Go ahead and bookmark that. When the conference is happening on those days, RootsTech will be streaming some of their presentations live on this website. So great way to keep up from home is to watch the live stream from the RootsTech website. In addition to that, they're also recording several of the classes that will be available through the week, and they will have instructions here later about how to get access to those recordings. In addition to what RootsTech is doing, Ancestry is also doing some things online for those of you who can't make it in person. So if you go to the Ancestry Facebook page and look for the Events tab, on the Events tab there you're going to see an event for Ancestry at RootsTech 2020. Click on that, go in and RSVP that you're going to the event, and basically what that does is it's going to put you in the event so that during the week of RootsTech, as we upload videos or classes or demos that we're recording or other things that we're doing there at RootsTech, on Facebook, you'll get notified that information has been added to the event. So it's a great way for you to participate. Again, just go find that event on Ancestry's Facebook page and click going, and that gets you into the event so that week you can participate. Next up, after RootsTech, is going to be the National Genealogical Society's annual conference. It's going to be the 20th through the 23rd of May. Now, this is also going to be in Salt Lake City. They rotate cities every year, and it just so happens that this year they're in Salt Lake. If you're wondering why Salt Lake, Salt Lake has the largest genealogical library in the world, and it's actually just a block away from the conference center where these events are held. And so a lot of people want to come here so that they can not just learn about how to do more family history and make more discoveries, but that they can also have access to that family history library. So that's going to be the 20th through the 23rd of May. You can still register for this event, and there is information about hotels and conference discounts and all of that on their website at conference.ngsgenealogy.org. Continuing on in the year, we have the 40th Annual International Conference on Jewish Genealogy that is going to be held the 9th through the 14th of August in San Diego. And again, this is a conference that rotates cities every year because it's an international conference. Sometimes it's in the U.S., sometimes it's outside of the U.S. This year it happens to be in San Diego. It is focused on Jewish genealogy, so if you have Jewish ancestry, that is something that would probably be beneficial for you to go and learn about some of the nuances of the differences of resources and research methodologies that are required. Even if you don't have Jewish ancestry, you might want to check out the program and just see if there's things that might be of benefit to you. For example, there will be classes taught on immigration into the United States. There will be classes taught about records available throughout Europe in various places. And so if enough of that is of value to you, you might want to consider attending the conference as well. As we move toward the fall here, the 2nd through the 5th of September, the Federation of Genealogical Societies Conference is going to be held in Kansas City, Missouri. Now, this year is a little bit of a milestone in genealogy conferences. For a very, very long time, FGS and NGS have been two separate entities, but last year it was announced that they are going to be merging. And so going forward after this year, there will only be one conference between the two organizations because they will now be one. So this will be the last FGS conference. I'm super excited about it being in Kansas City. I've got a lot of family history in and around that area. And if I didn't have to be at every one of these conferences, if I had to choose, I would make my decision based on the location of the conference. So, for example, the Salt Lake Conference has access to the Salt Lake Family History Library. Conferences in Fort Wayne, Indiana have access to the second largest genealogical library in the world. Conferences that are held in places where my ancestors lived, if I go there, I have access to local records and cemeteries and information that I might not have access to otherwise. So when choosing where to go to a conference, I always look at the program to see if it's a value to me, if there's new things that I think I will learn that will help me continue to make new discoveries in my family tree. And then I also look at the location. And then the final conference of the year that Ancestry will be attending is the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Societies Conference, AAHGS, as we sometimes pronounce it, OGS. Their conference is going to be held the 14th through the 17th of October, and that's going to be in Hampton, Virginia. So if you have African-American ancestry, and there's going to be some amazing classes and resources there. I don't believe last time I checked their program wasn't fully yet online, but hopefully it will be coming online in time for you to make a decision. October feels like a really long way away, but it always sneaks up on us. But the registration is now available on the website. And if you just do an internet search for AAHGS, you'll be taken to their website. And then from their website, there's a link to this page, which is to register for the conference. So those are the events that Ancestry will be attending in 2020. And those are the major genealogical conferences here in the United States. And like I said, I hope you'll come meet us and introduce yourself at the booth in the exhibit hall at these events. Some of you may notice that there's some conferences missing from this list, and that's because a couple of our major genealogical conferences are only every other year. So for example, the Southern California Genealogical Society's annual Jamboree is now an every other year event, so it's not happening in 2020. It will be happening in 2021, as far as I understand. Same thing with the New England Regional Genealogy Conference. It is only an every other year conference, and 2020 is their off year. So that's how that shakes up, and hopefully you can join us at some point during the year. Let's talk about updates to the site. We're going to start with DNA, and then we'll look at some things in the community tools and then on family trees. So first up is through lines. We introduced through lines last year, and since you and I last spoke about what's new, there has been a lot of really great feedback, and so we've implemented some of that feedback. And it's amazing to me what something even that feels like it's such a small thing can make such a big difference. So if you're not familiar with through lines, I do have a video on that. You can go check that out. I encourage you to go check that out so that you can understand that a little bit better. I don't want to get into that here. Here's what we've done though. One of the complaints or the concerns that you had was you have this huge page with all these ancestors on it and no way of knowing just at a glance without clicking through to view every single one of them if you have new DNA matches that have connected through a particular ancestor. So we took that feedback and here's what we did. You can just move your mouse over. So you don't have to click on anything. You just move your mouse. It's called a hover state. You move your mouse over one of these little through lines cards and you'll get a little overlay and it looks like this. This overlay is going to show you a few things. The first thing it's going to show you is how many of your DNA matches we think connect through this most recent common ancestor. In my case here, I've got James Lawrence, 136 DNA matches. It's going to show me how much DNA I share, the range of DNA that I share with the people on that match list. In this case, it's all the way from 6 centimorgans, which is the lowest that we share, all the way up to 3,481. which is the most you can share because that's my mom. And so that's, in this case, not terribly informative for me because I've tested a parent, but it is very informative for some of you who have not tested any immediate family members. Then the really cool feature is we will now show you if there are new DNA matches who you haven't looked at before who roll up through this particular common ancestor. And we're also going to show you a little updated notation in the top corner, even if you don't hover. So you can see down here on Keziah, I've got this little updated tag. Here on James, I've got this little updated tag. And that just tells me there's something there to look at. So I don't have to click through every single one of those to see if I can figure out what's new. So like I said, little thing, really big impact, which is important to save time that way. Also on Throughline, we have given you some updated filters. So some of you asked for, you've got this huge list of ancestors from parents, grandparents, all the way up to 5th great-grandparents. And if you do the math on that, it gets really, like a lot of people really fast. So we've given you some ways to kind of sort through some of those things. The first basic way is maternal-paternal. So you have your DNA is attached to the person in the tree who took the DNA test. We can then, based on the tree data, say, oh, well, these people are on the mother's side, these people are on the father's side, and we can just let you look at one or the other at a time. If your tree is, when your tree is linked, we look at your ancestors in your tree, then we look at your matches ancestors in their tree and try to figure out who the common ancestor is. That's how Throughline works. And sometimes one or the other or both of you don't have that common ancestor that we think it is in your tree. And so we show those to you as what we call potential ancestors. And that's just a suggestion for you to go and explore and to see, does the genetic evidence make sense? Does the record evidence make sense? Could this person really be my 4th great-grandfather? And so we show those to you as potential ancestors. Some of you wanted to just look at those, so we give you that filter. And some of you didn't want to look at those. You only wanted to see what you had already put into your tree. So you can do potential ancestors, or you can do ancestors in your linked tree. The last filter there at the top of the list, we allow you to filter that list of common ancestors down to just those with new DNA matches based on that updated tag I just showed you. So handy little things to save quite a bit of time. Okay, now we're going to talk about the updated member directory, and I'm going to get a little excited about this, and some of you may think I'm too excited about this, but I geek out over kind of funny things. So the updated member directory. Every single one of you has a profile on Ancestry. If you have taken an AncestryDNA test, if you have logged into, if you've ever created an Ancestry account or had a subscription at any time, even if you don't now, if you have a tree on Ancestry, you have an Ancestry profile. And last year, we updated the Ancestry member profiles. And I did a whole video about that. You can go check that out. But one of the things that people want to be able to do more now is to be able to search for other members in Ancestry. And there's all sorts of reasons. I want to hear them. I want to hear all the reasons you are looking for other members on Ancestry, and leave them in the comments here on the video so that you can help spark ideas for other people, and I'm super excited to read all of them. I'm going to share 2 of mine. So one is, sometimes when I'm doing family history research, and I'm searching on Ancestry, trying to answer a specific research question, like, who are the parents of this person in my tree, I'll come across other people's family trees. Now, I'm not going to just copy that information from that tree into my tree until I do a little more research, because they could be wrong, or they could be sort of wrong. And I want to make sure that I copy information only into my tree when I have a pretty high confidence that information is accurate. But I don't want to lose that information. So when I'm working on family history, I always just have a little notebook next to me. And so I'll write down the name of the tree owner. So you can always see that right there on the screen when you're looking at someone else's tree. So I'll write down the name of the tree owner. Well, this member search that's been updated now allows me to actually come in here and search for that member so that I can then find their profile page and get back to their public tree without having to worry about who I was searching for and how I searched and how I got where I got. Because sometimes at 3 a.m. when I'm shutting down for the night, I'm not the only one. I know I'm not. Sometimes I don't remember how I got where I got. But just writing down the username of the tree owner is how I get back. Okay, that's one way. The second way that I use the member directory is this. And some of you may think this is kind of silly, but it's happening surprisingly more often to me. As a matter of fact, it just happened 2 days ago. Sometimes I'm having conversations with people and we talk about how we think we might have common ancestry, or our families are from a similar place, or whatever. And we get curious about whether or not we show up on each other's match lists, or if it's possible that we're genetically related. So lots of relatives all over the world, but sometimes I run into them here in the office at Ancestry or in a Facebook group. And it would be really easy to just go into my DNA match list and search by username there to see, does this person show up on my match list? But I have tested myself and my parents and my grandma and some of my dad's siblings and my mom's siblings and first cousins on both of my parents' sides of the family tree. And I manage about 12 to 15 different DNA kits. And so instead of having to go into each DNA match list and search for this person, I can just come into the member directory, search for this person, pull up their profile page, and then just quickly scroll through and see if I or any of the tests that I manage match them or any of the tests that they manage. So it's a really quick way to compare that when I'm having conversations with people either online or in real life. So like I said, a little geeky. I'm super excited. I want to hear how you use the member directory, but it has been updated for search. Okay, another new feature that we've updated is the relationship sources. Now, this is actually not an update. This is brand new, but it might look like an update to you if you're not quite sure what you're looking at. So this is the facts page when you're looking at a profile of someone in your tree. And some of you have been around long enough to remember many years ago, we updated this and we pulled these sources here in the middle, front and center, because those sources are where you get the information that you put in your tree. As a matter of fact, you can also click on any one of those sources and it will say, you get these little pink lines, right, or purple lines that show you this piece of information in my tree came from this record. Or this record is evidence that supports this conclusion that I've come to, that this was actually her birth date, or this is where she lived, or whatever, okay? So if some of that language, if you're new enough that some of that language is unfamiliar to you, sources and evidence and conclusions, I would strongly encourage you here on the YouTube channel, click on the little magnifying glass so you can do a search on the Ancestry YouTube channel. And what you're going to look for is genealogical proof standard. I did an introductory video several years ago about the genealogical proof standard, and so I would just encourage you to go watch that and kind of familiarize yourself with those terms and what they mean in the context of family history discoveries. There's also then a 5-part series where I dive into it a little deeper. You're welcome to watch that as well, but at least go watch the introduction if some of these terms are unfamiliar to you. Now, this is fantastic. We have sources, we have facts supported by those sources. But one of the things that we didn't have until now is relationships also supported by those sources. So, for example, when I click on this 1910 census, it doesn't just show me that the 1910 census provides evidence of her birth date and place. It also shows me that it provides evidence of her father's relationship to her. So the 1910 census lists her with her husband and her oldest son, and she's listed as the wife of the head of household, and then the son is listed, and then the father-in-law of the head of household is listed. So all of that provides evidence of the relationships for Ada Mae's life. And that's important. It's important to understand that, because then what happens is I can go click on any, like for example, I could click on Eliza here, and see if I can figure out what sources I have that prove she's the mother. Because if I don't have any, I need to go find some, or I need to remove her from my tree. Because unless I have some evidence that says she is the mother of this person, I don't want to necessarily be making those suppositions or putting that out into the world. So it's a really great way to just really quickly click through the people in your tree on this profile page and check to see how those relationships stack up. And if you don't have a source that's in your tree, maybe it's not that you don't have a source, maybe it's just you haven't put it in your tree yet. And so that's a good impetus to do a little cleanup. Okay. Okay, that is the major product updates for the last few months, and we've got some other things that we're going to be highlighting at Roots Tech. As a matter of fact, at Roots Tech, I'm going to be giving an entire presentation on what's new at Ancestry, just covering the last year in review, and then also highlighting a few things that are coming up this year. So that will be live streamed from Roots Tech. You'll want to check that out. Let's talk about content. Genealogical records are still coming online, just so fast I can hardly keep up with them. If you have never joined us for a What's New episode before, you might not be aware of where you can keep track of this on your own. On Ancestry, if you click on search, scroll down toward the bottom of that menu there. It used to be the very bottom thing, but now the member search is below that. Just above member search, you're going to see card catalog. The card catalog is just a listing of every database on Ancestry, and you can search it by name of the state or the name of the country, and it will show you a list of the records Ancestry has. It's my favorite thing on our whole website because I always need to know what records even exist to solve my research question, or where can I go to find the record that I'm looking for. And the default sort of this list is by date added, so the newest stuff is always at the top of the list. So as new records come in, it's a really easy way to just keep track of what's coming in that's new. So let me just share with you a few highlights of some of the larger or more interesting record collections that have come in since we last talked. The first one is the newspapers.com obituary index. This is huge. Not only is it a huge database, but it's also a really big deal. I was going to say it's really big news, but then that felt too punny. So newspapers are a really valuable family history resource. I've talked about them before. I've got a couple of videos out there about that. I will do a video specifically about this collection in the near future, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it today, but I do want to just give you kind of an overview. Ancestry took some new technology. We're able to digitally read newspaper pages and pick out which things on those newspaper pages were likely obituaries or death notices. From that, a computer was then able to read every name in those obituaries to create a searchable index of those names. So that's what this collection is. Super valuable, right? Because obituaries give you all sorts of really rich detail and information, and we wanted to make them as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. And anytime I can get an index that tells me that information exists out there in the world, it's a good day. I've already made some amazing discoveries. Like I said, tell you more about that in the next video when we talk about this. I've got a lot of questions that have come in about this, and so I will answer those. If you have questions about this particular collection, please leave them here in the comments on the YouTube on this YouTube video. I'll look for those before I prepare that next video so that I can make sure that I answer as many of those as possible. I am going to answer one question today that I know has come up over and over since we released these records. When you think about who's listed in an obituary, you have the person who is the deceased, and then you oftentimes have people who predeceased them, so parents, sometimes siblings. You also have people who survive them, so a spouse or children, all sorts of different people that are named in that obituary. And so what Ancestry created is an every name index to these obituaries. So anybody who was listed in any obituary in this collection. What that means is you will get hints or search results for people who were named in the obituary. It doesn't mean they're the person who died, okay? And that's important because, you may be thinking, my grandmother's listed in this obituary from 1963, but I know she didn't die until 1984. Well, she's listed in the 1963 obituary because it's her mother's obituary, not because she died in 1963. So pay really close attention. Make sure you're looking at the right information. Or even better, if you have a newspapers.com subscription, you can click through and actually view the image of the original obituary. So we'll talk more about that. Leave your questions in the comments. I for sure want to make sure we answer as many of those as possible. Next up, we have some church records that have come out. There's the Denmark church records from 1812 to 1918, and the Illinois Roman Catholic Diocese of Springfield sacramental records, that was a mouthful, from 1853 to 1975. Church records are super important in family history research because government records or vital records don't always exist or didn't start until later in time. So some states here in the United States, for example, did not start keeping birth, marriage, and death records at a state level until the early 1900s. But churches have kept records oftentimes for much longer than that. You end up with people, religious leaders recording information about baptisms and marriages and burials and other sacramental rites in the church. So one of the things you need to keep track of in your family tree, if possible, is the religious affiliation of your ancestors, because that's going to lead you to different kinds of records. Now, sometimes those records get rolled up into singular databases because they've been turned over to archives in the country, and sometimes those records are still held by the original churches, and so you'll see things titled differently, like these Denmark church records versus this very specific Illinois Roman Catholic Diocese of Springfield. So just some things to be aware of as you start to investigate church records. Next up, we have released a set of census records, actually 2 sets of census records from Norway, one for 1801 and one for 1865. If you've been doing family history research for any length of time, you know that census records are a great framework to start to hang some of that other evidence on and correlate it against. And we love census records for U.S. research in particular. We've taken a federal census every 10 years since 1790, and other countries, England, Canada, for example, take a census every 10 years on the ones. Here in the U.S., we take them on the zeros, and then other countries take them at different times for different reasons, and so you'll sometimes see things that are like this, 1801 and then 1865 in Norway. Next up, we have a great collection of U.S. Veterans Administration Master Index from 1917 to 1940. Here's why this is important. You may or may not be aware, there was a fire in the Military Personnel Records Office in St. Louis in the 1970s. What that did, unfortunately, was destroy a huge amount of military service records for World War I, World War II, the Korean War. 80% of the Army records were destroyed. My own grandfathers, both of them, I've written to the Personnel Records Office and received back information that their records were lost in that particular fire. And what that means is, as that generation is dying off, which like I've lost both of my grandfathers, and that means that information becomes less accessible through memory, and so we want records, but we have this huge record loss that happened. And so anytime records come out or are made available from the military from that time period, I get super excited about it. This particular set of records is from the Veterans Administration. You will notice in the title it says it is just an index, which means it is just an index to the records that are held by the Veterans Administration. But I love me a good index, right? So love to know that there are records that exist, and I can search and see if there are or are not. And as soon as I learn that there are records, I can then write to the Veterans Administration and get those original records. Next up, we have some records from Finland, so lots of Scandinavian stuff we're talking about today. Again, these are church records. I think the thing that caught my attention about these two databases is that they go back to 1670. That's always amazing to me because we just talked about some record loss in the 1970s. There has been record loss in various places at various times. Some countries and cultures don't even keep written records in the way that we traditionally think about it. And so anytime you have a set of records that covers hundreds of years, that's really exciting, especially if you can get back into that time and place in your family tree, and then you can sometimes go back several generations very quickly through contiguous record sets. So 1670 is just kind of exciting for people with Finnish ancestry. I always think about Massachusetts. I know Massachusetts towns kept records starting in the 1600s, and we're really pretty consistent about it, and that's always exciting for people who have New England ancestry, or if you have Scottish ancestry, you have the old parish registers. There's just some places where there's just some really great records, and then some places where there is not. And so where they exist, it's exciting to see them come online. And last up, we have the U.S. World War II hospital admission card files. These are from 1942 to 1954. Again, anytime we can get these military records, they give us some interesting details and information about the service of our ancestors and our family members who served in the military and what they went through. Well, that is all I have for you today. So hopefully that was useful information. Again, let me just remind you or encourage you to go to the Ancestry Facebook page and click on that event tab and join that event for Roots Tech so that you can participate and follow along with the happenings at Roots Tech. And if you want to follow me over on Instagram at Crista Cowan, I'll give you some sneak peeks there as well. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.